today's study in Search the Scriptures. It's study number 22 in the book of Numbers, and it will cover chapter number 30 of Numbers, a chapter that is about vows. And we are going to attempt to answer two different questions. The first one, how does this chapter show our responsibility in our speech? And secondly, do you think the woman's relationship to father and husband should be viewed as merely local Israelite custom, or is there an implied principle that holds in the 20th century as well, or we would say the 21st century even today? Now let's look at Numbers chapter 30, beginning with verse number 1. Moses said to the heads of the tribes of Israel, "This is what the Lord commands. When a man makes a vow to the Lord, or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, but must do everything that he said. And when a young woman still living in her father's house makes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by a pledge, and her father hears about her vow or pledge but says nothing to her, then all of her vows and every pledge by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her father forbids her when he hears about it, none of her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. The Lord will release her, because her father has forbidden her. If she marries after she makes a vow, or after her lips utter a rash promise by which she obligates herself, and her husband hears about it but says nothing to her, then her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her husband forbids her when he hears about it, he nullifies the vow that obligates her or the rash promise by which she obligates herself, and the Lord will release her. Any vow or obligation taken by a widow or divorced woman will be binding on her. If a woman living with her husband makes a vow or obligates herself by a pledge under oath, and her husband hears about it but says nothing to her and does not forbid her, then all her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her husband nullifies them when he hears about them, then none of the vows or pledges that came from her lips will stand, and her husband has nullified them, and the Lord will release her. Her husband may confirm or nullify any vow that she makes or any sworn pledge to deny herself, but if her husband says nothing to her about it from day to day, then he confirms all her vows or the pledges binding on her, and he confirms them by saying nothing to her when he hears about them. If, however, he nullifies them sometime after he hears about them, then he's responsible for her guilt. These are the regulations the Lord gave Moses concerning relationships between a man and his wife, and between a father and his young daughter still living in his house. How does this chapter, question number 1, show our responsibility in speech? Well, we need to be true to our word, and we need to realize and consider that our word should be binding. And that being the case, we need to be very careful when it comes to giving our word in pledge or making a vow. Second question, do you think the woman's relationship to father and husband should be viewed as merely local Israelite custom, or is there an implied principle that holds in the 20th and 21st centuries as well? Well, there was quite a simple reason, really, that the husband and father had power to revoke a vow made by a woman in the time that the book of Numbers was written. And that reason was that the husband or the father ultimately would be responsible to fulfilling that vow, and their name would be on the line as well. After all, the only financial means really to fulfill the vow would fall upon the husband or the father, and the name of the husband or father would be at stake. That being said, though, the principle really still remains an important one to consider today. Whenever a husband and wife come together, they should be considered as one flesh, and a father and his daughter represent one family. It's not the case that the woman then is inferior or incapable of making a decision on her own, but in all cases it's the family's name that is at stake, the husband's name, the father's name that's at stake. And really, in all decisions, though, this should also work the opposite way. In all decisions, we need to consider one another. The woman today really should have just as much a right to break the vow of her husband, in my opinion, because in our society, her name can be just legally binding, and she is more often than not very significant, and at times the principal contributor to the financial well-being of the home. There is no rule that says that one person in the family should rule the roost. The fact of the matter is that we should all consider one another as an equal partner. I hope you, in a marriage, consider one another as equal partners. I hope in your family you consider one another before yourself, because that's really what this is all about in Numbers chapter 30. Hope this has been an enjoyable study to you. Look forward to you joining us next time as we start to finish up this fantastic book of Numbers. God bless. Have a fantastic rest of your day.